Elisa Haggarty, welcome to the Process Podcast. We are actually, before I hand the mic over to you, we are doing a podcast swap here. So we are actually on each other's podcast right now, or at some time in the future we are going to be. But I would like to start by welcoming you to the Process Podcast. Thank you so much for reaching out on social media. I think we have a lot of things in common in the space that we work in and the people that we serve. So I'm very, very much looking forward to this conversation, but I'll hand it over to you now, Lisa. Perhaps you'd like to introduce your podcast and who you are.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to be on the Process Podcast. And I love a podcast swap. This is our first podcast swap, or at least mine. And I think it's a really cool way to just get to know each other and also our audiences and share messages that matter. So I would say, welcome to my podcast, The School of Unlearning. I was really impressed just with your work over the years with athletes running your own gym, high performance. And I'm so curious to kind of dig into what performance means to you. And how you began all of this work and how you sustain it, knowing that it is a full-time mind-body commitment, right? I mean, being a human is that, but doing it for other people is requires quite a lot. So I'm curious what you're looking to unlearn in your life as you're, in this chapter, as a human, as a podcaster, as a coach. So yeah, I'm stoked to get into our shared interests.
Elisa, can you tell me about why you call your podcast A School of Unlearning and the concept of unlearning? What does that mean?
Well, I think unlearning is something everyone has to define for themselves. I don't think there's necessarily one textbook definition. I think that's the beauty of it. I've interviewed almost 40 guests on my podcast already, and everyone says something different. I think to me, unlearning is a bit of questioning the playbooks that were given to you and rewriting them so that they actually fit your physiology, your nervous system, your desires, so that you feel aligned with your life. I think I hit this point maybe the beginning of COVID. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York, for your audience. Used to live in Hong Kong, so we kind of have a shared connection there. Mid-COVID, early COVID, I was at a job at a medical company, and I was like really craving meaning, really craving connection. And I realized at that point in my life, maybe I was 36 or 37, probably 36. And I was like, I am like actively every single day rewriting the playbooks for relationship, how to work at a company, my relationship with money, like where I live and why, like what does success mean to me? Like, it wasn't that I was never a reflective person or that I wasn't always questioning things, but it was at this critical time where the world was falling apart. And I was like, what really matters? And I want to talk to other people because I know I'm not the only one grappling with what are we doing here on, planet Earth and why are we doing it? And that's kind of like, I was like, I think we're all basically unlearning. I think adulting is unlearning, truly. I think it's unlearning what you were fed the first 20 years of your life and keeping some good stuff and building upon that too.
Yeah.
What do you think unlearning is? What's your kind of vibe with it?
Well, it's interesting because I've never really used the words unlearning, but in hearing you define it, there's a lot of other, I think, principles that very much align with the same concept. It's kind of like the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. Knowing that you can change your situation and that we aren't set in stone, and your past and your traumas don't define who you are. And if you want to make change, you can. And then I guess this self growth and exploration, which is kind of like when you're looking into the future and trying to evolve the current you into being something else. And I guess in order to do that, there needs to be unlearning. It's a letting go of the past and who you currently are in order to open up the new and who you want to be. So I think it's actually a very nice. I like it. I like it as just more language to explain something that I think about and talk about all the time.
Yeah, I like that you kind of reference the past, present, future. I mean, I think every day here living on planet Earth, I'm just like, oh, I'd never thought about that before, or I've never thought to approach someone that way, or, and so I don't know where it began for all of us as humans. Maybe it's our desire for security, like our desire to have things be one way. But I just find that I think when I was growing up in a small town in New Jersey, I just thought my friends were my friends and they were going to be there for life. And I was always going to love and be able to play basketball. And I was going to become an English teacher and do that for 40 years and retire. And I mean, obviously none of that happened, and so I think there's this sense of like, when you're young and you're forming your sense of identity and safety in the world, you just think things are going to be a certain way. And yeah, you get to adulthood and you really get to reckon with change and uncertainty. So
Was there a turning point for you? Was there something like radically that changed your life that made you become even more
Ooh.
committed to the concept of unlearning?
um I mean, I think what got me into the work, so my background is in education. I was a high school English teacher for 4 years. And along that path, I just kind of thought I would stay in that role forever. I loved teaching. I loved kids. I loved literature and stories and people, right? It seemed like a no brainer to me. But when I was 22, I got in a really bad car accident and I was hit by a car. I was riding my bicycle and I had a really bad concussion. And yeah, I went into a phase of really extreme anxiety and depression. I think of back then, though, that was like 17 years ago. We didn't know a lot about concussions. And so they just kind of were like, drink a Gatorade, rest for a couple days, and you'll be fine. And that was not the case. And so I learned at that ripe young age with basically a bruised tailbone and a brain that was basically just like concussed, like truly like really out of it, right? I learned that I had to really create my own healing path. Western medicine was like, take medications forever. You're done, toast. And I was like, wait, what? I've never even, I had sports anxiety, but I never had anxiety and depression. So I really had to go out there, I felt, and fend for myself and fight for myself. And so a college coach of mine, she called me and I was in tears and she sent me a book. And it was a book on Buddhism, which, I dabble in, I practice in, I kind of respect all world religions, right, in some way. And this book was called When Things Fall Apart. And I had never learned or thought about letting the pieces be on the ground and be a little bit broken and like sit in the broken energy of heartbreak or an injury or your life turning around. So I really had to build my own resources back then. And that's when I began to unlearn mental health. I began to unlearn relationships. And I kind of created my own world, at that point. So
can I ask, when picking up that book and starting the unlearning process, what were some of the massive contributors that were adding to your anxiety?
Well, like in my personal life, you mean?
Yeah, at that point in time, you had this concussion,
Yeah,
start suffering from anxiety. What were the things that were
totally.
anxiety?
I mean, I think it was just I had just finished playing college basketball. So I had a team. I had these group of people, these coaches that were there with me every day. And then you're thrust into the real world, right? Where unless you're on a team or have an organization that you're with, you're kind of navigating life alone again in some weird way. I also was realizing more about my sexuality. I realized I was gay, I was a lesbian, and my family didn't know that. And so I really couldn't hold it in anymore. And I think with the concussion and all the anxiety and depression I was feeling, I had to let them know, like I was going through some other type of change that I had been withholding from them. And we know, I'm sure all of it, everyone listening here knows the energy drain that withholding brings. It's truly exhausting to keep something in. And so it was sort of this crisis, right? It was like they say a perfect storm. And I thought, well, I have to tell them. And of course, they were very loving and supportive, really for the most part, a little shocked. But they took care of me the best they could. But there was a lot of factors there. It was heartbreak. It was going through my first breakup that same week during the car accident. I mean, it was gnarly. I was kind of like, I looked up at the sky one day and I was like, yo, I think the universe loves me. I'm pretty sure whoever's running this show really loves me, and they wouldn't put me through this if it wasn't for my growth, if it wasn't for my betterment. And I had to believe that in order to kind of get through that year of my life. So
You're talking about holding things in and how exhausting that can be.
yeah.
Where are you at in your own life now when it comes to holding things in? Are you a completely open book?
Oh, I mean, I think what we have, like 16 to 100,000 thoughts a day, and beliefs and concepts and ideas that we're whirling with every day. So I think I'm learning to reveal. So I think of it like as withholding, when we withhold a feeling, a thought, a belief. This is part of the work I do in conscious leadership. When we withhold, we project, and then we lose connection. And when we choose to reveal, and that is an art, it's totally a skill, right? To like reveal consciously, not just dump on people. When you reveal, you own your story and you get to connect with yourself and the other person, hopefully, but definitely with yourself. So with me, I'm a lot more blunt, but I am very lovingly blunt, and I put a lot of thought into the things I share with people. And yeah, It definitely is a shift for me in the way that I operate. I say no a lot more. I'm like, no, I'm not going into Manhattan. I'm not doing it on a Saturday night at 10 o'clock. I'm going to stay home and take care of myself. And I think that is sort of part of my learning process, is like really listening to my body and being like, what do I need right now? So
Yeah.
what comes up for you when you think about this idea of withholding and revealing? Like, these are terms that I'm using, but they're pretty universal concepts. Like, what comes up for you?
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that. I literally just put a post up maybe just a couple of weeks ago talking about kind of where I'm at now in my life when it comes to sharing things that I would have deemed to be more personal and private in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the crux of the post was, for so long I lived. There was two parts to it. Number one was that I wasn't actually consciously aware of the way that I felt most of the time. So I hadn't created a connection with my thoughts, my feelings, emotions, and I can relate a lot of that to the environment that I was brought up in. We were an open speaking family that talked about our hard things. We were a grit your teeth and get the job done type thing. And as a result of that, was just years and years and years and years of emotions and feelings that was swept under the rug and never really addressed.
So much sweeping.
Yeah, so much sweeping.
Yeah.
And then, getting to a point in my life where I realized that was who I was, and I wanted to actually start to connect with some of my feelings and my thoughts and my emotions, because I could see that it was having a negative effect on my relationships. It was having a negative effect on my ability to lead my team, and create meaningful connections with them. And I guess like I was subconsciously realizing that it was creating a lot of distress in me. So I wasn't able to connect the dots as to why I'd always get sick, or why I had so many massive traumatic injuries, or why I'd have good days and I'd have really bad days, or why I couldn't sleep. It was just like all these classic, I guess, stress symptoms that I would never be able to connect the dots. And I would just put it down to, I'm just having a shit day. It's just the way it goes.
Right.
But one day I was like, nah, there's got to be something more here. And so that kind of like triggered my exploration with trying to unlock and listen and feel the things that I was actually feeling on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And then that was quite a harrowing experience, because then you start to realize like, holy shit, there's a lot.
That's when you begin to rumble. You're like, oh shit, now we're going in. Like, we're not just surface level.
Exactly. There's a lot under the hood here. And it was quite as exciting as it was to start to connect with the feelings and emotions, because it was like, this is opening up a whole new experience of life for me. It was also like every day was like, how much more? Like, how much more is there?
Seriously, right?
Yeah, so there was many years of just digging up the past and trying to sit with it and figure it out, and like I said, connect the dots. And then if you ever truly deal with the past, but when you start to make really good inroads there, you realize that actually this is going to be a part of life forever now. Now that I've opened up these gates, like, I don't ever want to go back to sweeping feelings under a rug anymore.
Good.
I want to always be feeling the feels, and be very consciously aware of everything that I'm thinking, feeling. And I guess the next crossroads is, okay, now that I'm aware of what I'm feeling, and I'm aware of the thoughts, I'm aware of the traumas, what do I do with that now? Like, do I just keep it to myself? Be aware of it, or is there another part to the piece, which is, if I start sharing this, maybe it's through a journal to start, maybe then it's speaking to my close friends and my family, maybe it's then starting a podcast one day and actually being able to talk about these things with a global platform and not worry about what the world might think. And I guess that's where I'm at now, and I have been for a number of years now, which is like, I don't want to keep anything in, like, it always feels better for me to share things out loud. Yes, like, I definitely feel resistance sometimes there's something where I'm like, I don't know if I want to share this. Should I share this? And then you lean into it and you're like, all right, I'm going to try it. And it always, nine times out of 10 feels a lot better. And I feel myself progressing as a human being, so huge. I guess that, in respect to the question, that's where I'm at. Yeah.
I have so many questions, Ed. Can you tell my audience that who's just met you now, just where you grew up? It sounds like you grew up in a house where feelings and expression was not necessarily, first and foremost. So where did you grow up, and who were some influences that, you know, inspired you to kind of be who you are today?
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up in Hong Kong, and that's where I am now. That's been home forever. And I very much associate Hong Kong with home. I have two amazing parents who did absolutely everything they could to raise myself, my brother, and my sister to be the best people we could be. They have interesting stories. You know, both of my parents grew up. They weren't born into affluent families. They have, I wouldn't call it a rags to riches story, but they worked very, very hard at a young age, didn't go to university, put themselves into the business world young, and just kind of grinded their way through the ranks and got to a point where they were, in their own eyes, and I think in many people's eyes, very successful business people. They both very much embodied exercise and health as a part of their well-being, and I think just those two things combined, like a tough upbringing with hard post-war World War II parents, grew into a world where, like, you've got to grind to the stone and make yourself something. Led to two very hardworking people who never said no to anything. Perhaps an element of people pleasing in the nicest way possible. I don't mean that as an insult, but people pleasing just because of the nature of the jobs that they were in. And as a result, in the way that probably we were raised, it was like, you can do anything, and it's like weakness is almost shameful. Boys don't cry type thing. And none of these things were said.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Yeah, none of these things were said directly. And honestly, when I say all this, it sounds like it's I'm slating the way that I was brought up, but actually there was so many amazing things that came from that. There were so many amazing things that came from that. That I think that led to both me and my brother having very successful sporting careers, being able to be a young entrepreneur and get through some very, very hard times and always persevere through it. But of course, there were costs to it as well.
Right.
The sports that we played was, we both played rugby. That was our main sport, and rugby is a very macho sport, right? We don't talk about emotions. It's all about toughness, and the rugby culture, which is just like, it doesn't have a definition, I would say, but in England, we would call it like lad culture. So lad culture is all about, it's about drinking, it's about sleeping with as many people as possible, it's about laughing at others' misfortunes. All these things, again, sounds crazy, but that's what bonded the rugby circles, and so that was my existence for 23, 25 years.
Yeah. So I want to go back to something real quick. You said, you were like talking about your childhood and you're like, oh, it sounds this way. But like, I think both can exist. I think you can have incredible, hardworking, loving parents who were like pretty much committed to just the grind and the hustle and showed you how to do that. Like they didn't talk about it necessarily. It sounds like they were like, I'm going to show you how to build, and to live in Hong Kong is no joke. Like, there's so many factors there, economically, socially, like it's not for the faint of heart to live and work in Hong Kong, I don't think, especially back then, right? And then, but also, like, there was something too that is important for us, I think, as adults, to also be like, and there were things I didn't learn how to express, and that doesn't negate that the parents or the family wasn't amazing. I mean, I had incredible parents too, right? And yet I didn't also see certain things. I saw a lot of people pleasing. I saw a lot of struggle and conflict, but the love was there. And so I think it's important, right, for us to realize that both shaped us. And I'm curious, where you said they were people pleasers, I'm curious, is that something you picked up or you feel you've dabbled in over the years?
100%. Yeah. My parents would have,
tell us more.
Yeah. So they were very social creatures. So we would have, every Christmas we would have 70 people invited around the house, and we'd have like this big schmoozing fest where everyone got drunk and socialized and had a good time. But we would actually have these parties kind of like every couple of months. My parents would host some big party at our apartment, and Hong Kong apartments aren't small, so 70 people in an apartment is a tight gathering. But I would always just, watch my mum and my dad especially, just kind of be like the life and soul of the party. He would kind of like be center stage,
Mm-hmm.
with a wine glass in his hand, like going around to everyone, cracking a joke, cracking a gag, making people smile. And I would just be an observer throughout all of this, as a young kid. And then when I got to about 4,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, it's my turn. It's my turn to step into that role now. And so, I wasn't old enough to drink, but I'd ask
Ah.
mum and dad, could I have a glass of wine? I won't even really drink it. I just want to walk around with a glass of wine in my hand like you guys. And I would be kind of like the kid schmoozing and, bonding with the adults. Like, and again, like a lot of really great things came out of that. It meant that I built confidence and comfort speaking with people a lot older than me. Because, when I eventually started my coaching business at the age of 20, I was coaching people 40, 50-year-olds on my first day of work and feeling confident with it. But when I look back at the conversations that were taking place, with my parents and then with myself, it was very, very superficial. It was like, how you doing? Let's talk about the sport. Let's talk about the weather. This conversation. And I think that way of communicating then embedded itself in adulthood for me. So that was a lot of my relationships with friends in secondary school, moving on to university, especially. I think that's where it really reached like a climax for me, where I moved to a new country, felt like I had to like reinvent myself and build a whole new friendship connection.
Yeah.
Very, very superficial conversation, so never really experienced deep relationships. And I think I embodied a lot of like avoidant relationships, I would say. I would, especially with in intimate relationships, I'd always keep an arm's distance. Would never get too close to them.
Yeah.
And there's I've done a lot of exploration around that and why I think I did that. But yeah, the people pleasing part was cool. And it was just it was all about wanting to be loved. And I guess what I think about that now,
Yeah.
because I do still catch myself falling back into that sometimes. I feel like the urge to want to people please.
Sure. Of
And you catch
course.
yourself in the moment and you're like, okay,
Of course.
do I want to say that? Do I want to do that? Or do I want to not do that? But it really, really, like the way I define it now is like it's abandoning yourself with the goal of pleasing someone else. And I just don't, the idea of abandoning myself, it's just not something that resonates with me anymore. So, and that's only, I can only say that with confidence because I know who I am. I've done the work. I've put in the hard yards. I'm going to continue to put in the hard yards until the day that I die. But I have more of a clarity as to who I am, what I believe in, what my values are, what are my priorities. And when you know those things, it becomes a lot easier to not people please. It becomes a lot easier to say no. So, I don't think one is able to do without the other.
So do you follow Brene Brown at all?
I do. Massive.
She's like a organizational psychologist. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Courage over comfort is one of my values.
That's right. She's a powerhouse. And one time I heard her on a podcast and she said, people pleasers, she goes, if we're really honest, people pleasers are liars. Like they're actually just lying, like they're sacrificing themselves for the good, what they hope is the good of others. But usually people pleasing does result in both people actually not getting what they want. Because when we abandon ourselves in any sort of ask or request or compromising our integrity, our values, which again, this is the hour by hour task of being a human. Like you don't do it once and you're set. You have to constantly practice, I think, sharpening the sense of showing up for yourself. Other people suffer. They don't actually get a chance to do what they need to do or really get to know you, right? Like your partner or your friends, whomever, like they don't actually get to know you, which is actually hurtful to them. Like, they don't get to show up for you the right way. And it's hard. I think that one of the things I've learned in the concept of people pleasing is that I generally might go into people pleasing because some level of fear in the room or the conversation, and then I'll kind of go into a moment of freeze, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. We have like a nervous system response. So I've tracked myself over the years. I don't fight a lot. I don't run a lot. I'll stay in really uncomfortable situations. I've learned to do that growing up as the youngest of 7 kids. I've been in a lot of loud rooms and lots of yelling. I know how to stay there, but I'll freeze and I'll kind of get real quiet. I'll show no affect and I'll kind of like look down. And, you know, it's very subtle. You know, no one really notices it unless they're watching me. But I've learned to observe when I go into like a freeze mode. And I've learned ways to work with that. But I people please less when I'm aware of my nervous system response to people, crowds, requests, things, you know, wanting more, you know. So how does that land for you? Do you have a sense of how you respond when you feel like you're in threat or fear or?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually the opposite to you, which is funny. You know, your response is
Yeah.
just kind of freezing and going into yourself. My natural response is like I guess something that one of the fears I have is the fear of silence. And what silence represents to me, silence represents that I'm not interesting to the other person. And therefore, if there's a moment of silence in the conversation, that means that this person's not essentially what it boils down to is they don't like me because I can't hold a conversation. And so my response in that social moment is actually just to make noise. I don't mean random noises, but it's just to blabble, talk about nothing and everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, not even be conscious of the words that I'm saying. And, you know, that was my restaurant. And I can really see it now in others, you know, because, you know, I have created so much awareness around that being my response. And now when I see it in other people and I see them, I empathize with them deeply straight away because I'm just like, oh, I think I know where you're at right now. And you know, if I'm the other person in the conversation, I'll do everything I can to put that person at ease, to make them know, hey, you don't have to fill the silence. You know, it's totally okay to not have to say anything right now. Like I'm still enjoying the company. So yeah, that's interesting that we were kind of opposites in that sense.
Yeah. It's so interesting to think about that, like not being comfortable with silence or stillness. I find a lot of my clients have a very hard time with stillness, and I think most Western America just has a hard time because we're inundated with like, you know, notifications and, you know, texts and buzz and TikToks, whatever. And I do think people have a very hard time with, it's almost like our nervous system does not know what to do. We don't know how to interpret the space. We don't know literally what to do with it, right? Because we've always been fed things. I had a thought there. I was talking to a client of mine and she's like a CEO of a consulting company. And we were talking a lot about communication. And I find, and I'm curious, Ed, about you, we mimic, I think, as we grow older, the way we speak, the cadence, the tone, the, you know, inflection that we use mimics exactly what we did at a young age to survive in a conversation. So for me as a young kid, I learned if I'm not loud and fast with what I got to say, you know, I only had a couple seconds to get the attention at the dinner table of 9 people. So, or I just wouldn't be heard. So I learned to talk real fast and say things and, you know, and that's how I learned how to communicate because it was my way of finding a seat at the table. Right. Anywho, so I'm learning now, right, as I speak with and to people is to just pace myself. And I find that to be really, really interesting because once you learn your nervous system response to fear, and then you learn how you communicate, you're like, oh, I did that then to survive. I don't have to do that anymore. So jumping to one of my clients, she grew up in a similar environment to me. And when she goes to networking events, you know, what do you do? Right. She kind of goes off for 4 minutes, just nonstop. Well, I do this and this and this and this. And we said, okay. So we paused. We talked about it a little bit. And I learned this from my business coach years ago. She goes, just give them one line. Like slow down and give them one line. And I'm curious what you think about this, but with my client, I talked about this and I said, well, I would just say, I help people reduce drama. And I would just pause and like wait for the other person to be like, drama? What do you mean? What kind of drama? And then it becomes a conversation versus like a pitch or, you know, like a talking at someone. And I guess we're kind of traversing into this concept of communication, but I think it all does relate to like, again, patterns we saw young and like, I'm relearning and unlearning how to communicate all the time when I find I want to fill the space, like you said. So,
yeah, I resonate deeply with that. I think you probably got a pretty good idea of naturally how I communicated in this world, which was, like you said, very fast, a lot of words, very surface level conversation. And the most challenging times now, like you said, are in those like the busy room with lots of people you don't know. So you don't have any deep relationships when you start. Then it's like, okay, so how are you going to operate now, Ed? Like, are you just going to go back to that kid in the room with like 50 adults around you and just smooth and give everyone a little bit of nothing? Or are you going to actually just try and create some deep communication? So I basically as a challenge every time. And the interesting thing is, just last night, I was invited back to my old secondary school. I graduated almost 20 years ago. And, I was invited back to be a guest speaker at the Sports Awards ceremony, which they have annually every year. And it's the second time I've done this. And I'm bringing this up because it comes to a few things. Number one, the first thing I thought about when I was asked to be the presenter and to do a speech, because one of our teachers was leaving after 23 years of service, a guy who had a big impact on me, was, okay, is this really in line with my priorities? Like, I know that public speaking, it's a hard ask. Like, you speak in front of a really big audience, like there's going to be some stress, there's going to be some nerves. Like, do I want to put that on my plate right now? And, I think over the last few years, I've actually said no to a lot more public speaking opportunities than I used to, just because I know, it's like, does this really align with what I want to be doing and the things that really bring me fulfillment? But I said yes because, this guy has just given me so much. The school had given me so much, and I felt like I wanted to give back. So then the next challenge was, okay, I'm going to be now stepping into the school where I'm going to see lots of teachers that I knew, lots of teachers that I don't know. How are you going to handle yourself? And these are actually the challenges. This exact challenge of being in a busy room of people I don't know is actually one of the challenges that I enjoy the most at the moment, at this point in my life, because it's a challenge to myself. Like, are you gonna abandon yourself, Ed, or are you gonna be true to who you really are? And I think the way that I operate now in those spaces, because I think in my job, I'm in that environment quite a lot. We run a lot of athlete camps where we have 40 to 50 people come to us, and there's always a welcome dinner, there's always a closing dinner. 50 people you don't know, and you connecting with them all weekend. Is that I just ask a lot more questions and I listen a lot more. And I think that's just something I do a lot more in life. So it's less about me doing the talking or me having to do the sales pitch or me doing the who am I, what do I do? And I'm actually just I just ask and I listen. So I spend a lot less time talking now and a lot more time just listening to people and like just genuinely like learning from other people. I think it's fascinating. Every question that I ask, for every person I answer, every conversation I have and every question I ask is an opportunity for me to learn something about someone else. And honestly, it's one of the things that makes me love podcasting. So already in 20 minutes, I've learned a lot of new language around things that I think about all the time just by having this conversation with you. So what do you take from that?
Well, I'm curious of two things. First of all, is it sounds to me you're enjoying communication more. You're enjoying connecting with people more. It sounds like the pressure's off you and you're actually like in a space with peers who are equal to you, right? Who have equal interest, equal value, equal human, introspection to bring. And you're not the star of the show. And that seems like, just by the way you're explaining it, more enjoyable, no?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah. And my other question is, I was going to ask you, how do you do it? Like, so okay, asking questions, good tool, good technique. I find a lot of people when they get in public situations like school, work events, social, just going to a bar, like, again, sort of wanting to fill the space and, or maybe they have social anxiety or they feel like they don't have anything interesting to say. Like, I'm always just interested in people's techniques of, for you, you're a high performance coach, your growth mindset. Every day is a day to get better. Every day is a day to work on the human experience, right? Not just fitness, but the human experience. And I guess, for a lot of people listening, like maybe they're not performance coaches, but they do want to get better at connecting with humans. So what are some tools or things that you do when you're in that room? You feel yourself maybe going back into an old pattern, wanting to dominate the conversation or bring cool things up to fill the space. Like, what do you do with your mind and body to kind of break that pattern?
Yeah, That's a great question. I think a really hard question as well. I've got so many things on the top of my mind. I think number one, what it really comes back to is what we already talked about, which is, Ed, you're not here to people please. And I have to remind myself that, this social interaction is not about me trying to be loved by everyone, because the blabbering Ed who just wanted to have a little conversation with every person was operating out of a fear of not being loved by everyone. And so now when I come into those situations, I remind myself that is not the intention anymore. The intention is not to be liked by everyone. The intention is just to speak, ask questions, listen. And if people love me because of that, then fantastic. If they don't, that's also totally okay. Like our vibes just connect better with certain people and less with other people. And I'm well aware of that. So the goal is no longer to leave that room being the most popular person.
Totally.
I think just that change in mindset really takes a lot of the pressure off communicating in a certain way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think the second thing is...
Yeah. Well, it sounds like...
Please go.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the second thing you talked about...
I'll go. I think we might have
we got a bit of a lag. Continue. Go, Elisa.
We have a lag for anybody listening. We have a tiny bit of a lag here in our connection. It's fun. We're getting to play ping pong in conversation. Well, I was just going to say that it sounds like it's a big unlearning for you, and just how to navigate space with people. And I think it's admirable. It's also fun. I like to sort of operate by this principle of, am I committed to being right or liked, or am I committed to learning? Any given moment, am I more committed to being right, to being liked, to having control, or am I just more committed to learning? I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think both can happen, but I do find that people, again, we kind of go back into our habits. Like, I just want to own the room. I want to fill the space. I want to have the most interesting story. And I heard someone say something once, is we rarely ever in a room talk about the most interesting thing. We rarely talk about the most interesting thing. We recycle in conversation. We recycle the same 15 things we've been saying to the same 15 people all week long. And that's why I think people are sad and depressed and lonely, not because they don't have people around them or they can't pick up the phone, but because we're not talking about anything that really matters. It's part of why I started a podcast too, is I was like, we can't be talking about the weather, debt and our landlord all day long. Like, I'm sorry, like, come on, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I love the way you put that, that it's not about being right or wrong and being the most liked, but it's about learning. And I guess that like encapsulates it perfectly. And I'm gonna use that language now, Elisa, when I think about this stuff. It's just another opportunity for learning. But going back to your question, like, what are some other things that I do in that situation? I think being aware of my autonomic state. You talked about fight or flight, and we know that the fight or flight state is when, like, heart rate gets a little bit high, blood pressure starts to increase, your palms get a little bit sweaty, your face gets a little flushed. On the other end of the spectrum, we have like our kind of rest and digest state. When you're calm, you're kind of in that flow state, like you're not really worried about anything. And all day, every day, I'm very consciously aware as to which end of that spectrum I'm in at any moment. And if I feel myself tipping towards that fight or flight state, like I feel my palms getting a bit sweaty, I feel my heart rate increase, my breathing rate is increased, I'll try and bring myself back down as quick as I can. Now, there are times in life where you need to be in that state, right? If I'm going to do a heavy back squat and try and hit a new 1 rep max, like, I can't be in rest and digest state, relax, because I'm not going to have enough tension to lift that weight. If I'm playing sport to a high level, to be in that state, like, sometimes the pressure and the stress is good, and adrenaline and cortisol is what we need in the moment. But there's a lot of times where I don't want to be in that state, but my body's putting me there. So I may go into a social situation or a podcast. Like, I've had podcasts where I've had a big guest on who's got a massive following, a big reputation. And I can feel myself. I'm sitting here on Zoom waiting for their camera to pop up, and I can feel my heart rate. Like, it's like 170 beats a minute. I'm like, this is not where I want to be right now. I need to be relaxed and calm, ready to have a conversation. And so I guess
Yeah.
having some strategies in that moment to bring me back into a relaxed state. And often that's just taking a few breaths. Maybe it means just close my eyes, take myself to a corner of the room, taking myself to the bathroom in that social situation, and just taking 5 to 10 really deep breaths. Like box breathing always works really well for me. Big breath in through the nose, some form of breath hold, slow exhale. And honestly, in like 5 to 10 breaths, I feel calm again. And when I'm
Totally different.
calm, I can go back into
Totally different.
that busy room and be like, I can operate at the level I want to operate again. Because when you're calm, that's when you can be present. Often when you get into that high sympathetic state, you're not really present. It's like that's when your thoughts are racing. That's when you're starting to think about, does this person like me? Am I being entertaining? How do I look right now? How am I being perceived? What should I say next? Where should I? And as soon as I'm getting, and I realize that I'm not present, it's another thing I think about a lot. How present am I right now? I know that I need to do something to get me back to present, because I always operate better when I'm present. What are your thoughts?
For sure. For sure. I have so many thoughts. I want to put a plug out there to something you said, and that this is a bigger conversation. I think we're kind of dancing around the nervous system quite a bit, which is so important for, frankly, what both of us do. And anybody listening as a human who wants to have some responsibility for their presence in the world. When we think about the nervous system too, one of the things I've unlearned over the last couple of years is that, someone said to me once, like, just stay calm, stay calm. And I was like, and after I studied some work about the nervous system and how we have the parasympathetic, we have the sympathetic, and both are very, very valuable. I mean, sex requires the sympathetic. I mean, giving a TED talk requires the sympathetic. I mean, doing a squat thrust requires the sympathetic. And I think the sympathetic gets really this weird sort of like, taboo around it, like get out of that fight or flight and get into calm. And I think people really, really, really need to understand that they have to be in the sympathetic. It's really important for really what we would call a regulated nervous system. Someone sent me a post the other day on Instagram, and it was like some person quoting like, calm is the goal. And I reposted it. I was like, no, it's not. It's not the goal. It's not actually. A regulated nervous system is an expressive nervous system. It's one that goes to sympathetic state and releases when it's appropriate, right? Let's say the voice or the sound or the frustration. If we do not release, we recycle. We actually become people pleasers. And I think it's really important. So all this actually does connect to performance, communication, childhood, right? Because as a kid, I was taught to not express. I was taught to be quiet, to be calm, to be still, to be good. And that shit doesn't serve me. Not really. I am at my best when I'm expressive and big and free flowing. And of course, there are times, like you said really beautifully, that when I get on to talk or when I go into coaching mode with my clients, I absolutely want to be more grounded and present and alert. And that might be a bit more parasympathetic, depends, but I think it's really important. I also want to give a shout out while I'm on this topic to a guest of mine, Kimberly Johnson. She wrote the book Call of the Wild. It's specifically dedicated to women, but all humans could really benefit from it. She talks a lot about this beauty of the titration between the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and the space that we have to dance between. And I just love her work. So I just want to shout out her book here.
Yeah, I love that. I want to just jump in on that. Because you're right, like life is a balance. It is a dance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And if you take out, if you even just you put us on a sofa and we ask us not to do anything, the way that our hormones and our body is regulated, like cortisol, which is really the main hormone that puts us into the sympathetic state, it naturally rises as the sun rises. So as the sun is moving up into the middle of the sky at midday, like we are naturally more wired to be in a sympathetic state. And as the sun starts to fall and the moon starts to rise, our sympathetic system should downregulate and the parasympathetic system kind of takes over. That's totally natural. When you can understand that and embody it, then it's like, don't be scared. Don't be scared of putting yourself. And it's the same idea, it's why Brene Brown's quote, courage over comfort, resonates so deeply with me, because it's like, if you just choose comfort all the time, and you just choose easy in your life, like there is no growth. And if you're just happy to exist and be the way that you've always been and not, venture into new horizons, then okay, like choose comfort and choose calm all the time. And that's okay. That's just not the life I choose to live.
Yeah. I'm going to challenge you a little bit, Ed. You down for that?
course.
So what I think is interesting about this conversation is the nuance of growth mindset and this concept of we grow the best out of our growth. We have the most growth when we are not in a comfort zone. I think that is nuanced and really interesting.
Mm.
And I think what people need to understand about it is the nuance. And so from literally a nervous system perspective, a human physiology perspective, some of our most amazing performances in the TED Talk, the flow state, in the shooting, the basketball, in the rugby, in the dance and the drawing, that is our comfort zone. Now, we didn't always get to be Olympic level. You know, when we were young, we had we dabbled a little bit. We had a small growth, we had a small comfort zone, but we expanded our comfort zone. So I think actually people want to expand their comfort zone. I think physiologically and psychologically, we perform best when we're in a space of safety. Let's call it psychological safety and confidence. And then I think we say, I'm really excellent, say at public speaking, let's say hypothetically, I don't know. And I say, but I want to get a little bit better at this in public speaking. So I'm going to stay in my comfort zone of excellence, of genius, of flow. And I'm going to dabble a little bit and try one thing new, and I'm going to expand. So I think that the conversation in the wellness world can be blown up and misunderstood. People think I have to like endure pain and like do crazy shit to grow, and that's actually not the case. I think like we're kind of saying the same thing, but the massaging there is really important, because for years people take jobs that they're really not equipped for, like truly at all, like shouldn't be in it, and they struggle and suffer, and they don't get the right help, or they they stay in a relationship that is nothing around comfort, nothing around safety. And they suffer because they think, oh, this has to be, we have this world where we think growth can only come with pain. And I just don't agree. I think it can come with both. And it's a bit of a language thing there, but I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. You know, if it was just about doing shit that scares you all the time,
We would be
I mean,
freaked
like,
out.
yeah, you wouldn't actually probably get good at anything or love
Yeah.
anything or be passionate about anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're totally right. I think that explanation is very, very important. And just bringing it back to my own story, like there are so many things that I say no to every day that I know are very uncomfortable, and actually because they're uncomfortable is why I say no to them. So
Yeah. Because
I
you
guess
know where you are. That's
yeah,
right.
that's just not what I want to be doing right now. And
Yeah.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. I want to be staying within my comfort zone. But I guess trying to give our maybe our listeners like a practical example of this is that, yeah, I'll take yesterday's example, the public speaking event, which was, okay, I don't really want to do this. It's not massively aligned with the things that I want to be doing right now and where I want to be allocating my time. But I see this as it's for a really good cause, and this can be my one public speaking thing that I do in the next 6 months. That's okay. And so in the lead up to this talk, like it is a bit uncomfortable. Like I was getting a bit nervous. I was thinking, shit, I haven't really prepared for this talk. I want to make sure that I do the school and everyone proud. I'm the only person that's been invited to be a special guest at this award ceremony. And so of course there's constant questions of doubt. Maybe you should just pull out. I genuinely thought 4 days before, I was like, I might just shoot the organizer a message, say that I'm actually busy because I might actually don't really want to do this anymore. And then in hindsight, having completed it, having put in the work to create the speech, and like you actually just said, within my comfort zone, because I do enjoy public speaking, but I actually set myself a challenge yesterday, which is I don't want to have a fully prepared speech in front of me. Instead, I'm going to have some bullet points, and I want this to be more of like a storytelling, which is going to be challenging for me in front of a really, really big crowd. But I think if I can do it, and if I execute it to a level that I'm happy with, I would level up in my minds as a public speaker. And so I did it. I'm really happy with how I executed it. And I left last night coming home, and I was just so stoked. I was so happy that I said yes to doing that. I was so happy that I took the challenge to deliver a talk in a slightly different way. And I guess, going back to what you said, like I stayed within my comfort zone. It was not a completely foreign environment. It was a school that I knew very, very well.
That's right.
Staff and people that I knew well. It was talking about a subject I knew really, really well. But I took a bit of discomfort within that to do something a bit more challenging. And I came away and I feel like I've leveled up. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
That's a great example too of like knowing that maybe this is, let's call it lower stakes than maybe global TED Talk, perhaps in some capacity, although who knows, right? Everyone is always impacted at a talk. But if you think about this opportunity as a way to just practice non-scripted bullets, let me just have a conversation and talk to these people. Like, that is a great example of, of expanding your comfort zone and coming away with a new tool. Yeah, that's incredible.
So something I was thinking about when you were talking about the the fight or flight, rest or digest, the two sympathetic and parasympathetic states. And what you said about your guests, which is life is just this constant balancing act between the two. And going back to what you said before that, which was like, don't be afraid of the stress, don't be afraid of the sympathetic state. A lot of great things happen when you're in that state.
Big
and
time.
I think that's something that I'm very conscious of every day, is trying to get that balance right. So knowing that if I have things that unintentionally become a little bit stressful, maybe something happens at work, maybe someone hands in their resignation, maybe someone has this complaint, maybe someone gets injured on the training floor, and these are these unforeseen, unforecasted things that come into your day that put you into a state of the sympathetic state, the fight or flight mode. And I'm very aware that too much time spent in fight or flight has some fairly negative consequences.
Yeah.
And I think we've probably all experienced that in life, whether it's in our professional careers and we get to a point where we're miserable, we're depressed and we're burnt out, or as athletes, we get to a point where we're also burnt out, but we're injured and we're broken. And I've experienced both of those many, many times in my professional and my sporting careers. And that experience has taught me that it's like, I need to be better at managing that relationship between how much time I spend in both states. The way that I used to look at it, which I think is like the cliche, you need to find balance in your life, would be, okay, I need to match, if you put it in the simplest way possible, every hour spent in the sympathetic state, I've got to spend an hour in the parasympathetic state. And if I can do that every single day, I'll be perfectly balanced. But shit just doesn't work like that, right? And so the way I guess I see it now is that I kind of look at it more as like a season of life. Okay, so I might be able to go through a couple of weeks, a couple of months where I am managing that relationship 50-50 perfectly. But I'm also going to have months, weeks, multiple days where I am very on the end of the sympathetic fight or flight state. I have days after days which are high stress. There's a lot on my plate. And I'm very well aware that every extra day I spend in that state, I'm getting myself a little bit closer to burnout. I'm getting myself a little bit closer to getting sick, getting myself a little bit closer to getting injured. And so I know that, okay, I can do this for a while, but at some point in time, I'm going to have to get myself back to the other end of the spectrum. And maybe that means taking a few days off. Maybe that means having a holiday. Maybe that means giving myself a bit of a digital detox. So rather than thinking an hour by hour, a day by day basis, now I'm kind of like looking at the grander picture of life and just making sure that at some point I've got to try and balance it out as best I can. And that's really that's what longevity means to me in many ways. I talk about longevity all the time in the training space, in the professional space. It's like the individuals who can get that balance a little bit better in their lives are probably the people who are going to be doing this for a really, really long time. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I was riding my bike the other day in New York, and I thought to myself, I was maybe riding to go to a chiropractic appointment, which is often very restorative and relaxing for me. But just getting there felt stressful, like cars and ambulances and beeping. And I was like, this feels antithetical to going to a bodywork session, right? And I just thought to myself how amazing it is to be a human on this planet and obviously get the opportunity, right? It's a huge gift to be alive. But to be trying to regulate this system, to know the system, to be aware of the system, to regulate the system, like it is a full-time job. Like the next time someone asks me, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a full-time human, like full-time human committed. Like I am a scientist of my own experience because it never ends. I mean, I just think that I would actually say before we get to balance anything, we all have to be acutely aware, like pen and paper. I do this with my clients. What happens when you're in fight or flight? What are the statements, the beliefs, and the behaviors? And we literally go through, we list it out. Like, what are the words you say? Well, I say should a lot. I don't have enough a lot. he's wrong, I'm right, binary thinking. You start to really see the patterns of your language. And then you start to see the patterns of your beliefs. Well, there's no point in trying. And, people don't really care anyway, or, just very defeated thoughts. Or again, I'm never going to have enough, a thought there too, or belief. And then we get into behaviors. And so I think that like the more you can literally map it out, and I have my clients do this, it is the most important thing. And then you start to reckon with that a little bit. You start to realize most of your life has been in that category of like sympathetic stress, never having enough, sort of fear-driven scarcity. And I think that once we begin to spend many months observing ourselves with like a very critical lens, very loving lens, then we begin to say like, well, which one do I want to feed? It's like they say in like sort of like the Buddhist text, like, do we want to feed the anger? We can feed the anger all day long, or we can feed the joy, and anywho, so I think, yeah, I think doing an inventory matters. And then we get to see if we're willing. I think wanting and willing are very different things. I want to work out every day. Some days I'm not willing. And how do I know that? Because I didn't work out yesterday, And so I think there's something that has to happen around deep self-awareness that people often get to when they're sort of putting pen to paper around this stuff. So
yeah, I'd love it. Can I ask, Elisa, when you're asking your clients to do that inventory,
yeah,
where you're asking them to write down, what they say and how they act when they're in a certain state, how do you help them become aware that they're even in that state in the first place?
Well, generally people come to me because they're in some level of drama in the workplace, right? So my work, I basically help people reduce workplace drama. And it's usually starting always with themselves. Like, I have drama with my boss. I know that I need to change. Help me do that. I have drama with my team, or I have a career issue conflict and I don't want to be in this job anymore. And obviously transfers always to the personal realm, but people usually come to me knowing that something needs to shift. But they don't, I think, Ed, people have a good amount of self-awareness to know that I need coach, or I need support, or I need to go to the gym. But that's where I think coaching is so important for people. And that's why I have a coach too. Like, I have people in my life who help give me a mirror. So how I do it is we study together. I teach the 15 commitments to conscious leadership. We study, we read together, and I help them understand through obviously like literal activities of pen to paper. Show me the last 3 times you were in fight or flight. Walk me through 2 minutes on the clock. Just talk about it. And what were you thinking? What were you doing? What were you believing? And we actually map it out. And they're like, oh shit, I've been doing that my whole life. And so you start to see patterns in your personal life, your work life, but it does require pen to paper. We can't just be meta about it, and be like, oh yeah, I know I'm always, wanting to be right in the workplace. We got to kind of see how it shows up. I think Sharon Salzberg, one of my favorite meditation teachers, always says we have to be a scientist of our own human experience. No one else will. Like, we have to. So I think I'm sure you do the same work, right? Within fitness and training, is like, it's not just general. Like, you have to personalize it. You have to make it very specific to people, or else change won't happen,
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I guess, Elisa, I never really asked you what I mean, just hearing you speak about all of this, clearly it's something that you're super knowledgeable about and very passionate about and have a lot of experience in. But what was a catalyst that moved you from being the English teacher to being a coach of, and you class yourself as, you coach conscious leadership, the conscious leadership coach. Like, what brought you to this shift in your career?
Yeah. Well, it was that first shift when I had that car accident. I started to really embrace nutrition and mindfulness and meditation really strongly, right? Because it was my main prescription for health at the time. And I was giving that to myself. And then I spent about 10 years in the realm of nutrition and mindfulness, teaching, coaching people. And in that time, I started to work for a medical health tech startup. And at the startup, we were giving great care to patients, really helping transform the way that Western medicine was approaching chronic disease. And I was really proud of the care we gave. But internally, the employees were really in distress. Lots of drama, lots of maybe gaslighting, manipulation, dishonesty, just like, human behavior, frankly. It wasn't like this place was radically bad. It was just that there was a breach of integrity. in most leadership positions. And I started to realize how much of an art it was to be a leader, to be conscious, to be truly genuine with your words and your actions. Like, I started to realize that that is not the norm, actually. And I realized that I wanted to solve for that. So I've kind of always been the person, Ed, where like, again, I thought I would be an English teacher for 40 years and retire. I have never been that. I keep pivoting and changing based off the needs of the people around me. So when I was in that job about 5 years ago now, I started to teach the executive team and the leadership team the principles of conscious leadership. And so what I would say it is that it's a method that allows us to understand our reactivity, come to peace and acceptance with our reactivity, our patterns, our drama patterns, let's call them, and then learn tools so that we can shift out of the drama patterns. That's all. And sometimes we can't shift, and we have to settle into some deep level of self-acceptance about our stubbornness with our brother or our drama with our ex. Like sometimes we can't shift out of the drama. But the conscious leadership principles, really, there's 15 commitments, and one of them is responsibility. My second favorite one is feeling your feelings to completion. And I dabble in a lot of the other ones, obviously, with my clients. So it's breaking drama patterns and doing it with more curiosity and play about the human spirit. It's not about like goal setting. It's about like introspection and really creating a life. It's almost like rewriting your operating system, like it's a commitment to rewrite your operating system in a way that is more caring, more loving, more curious.
So I think what's interesting about that is, so you have leaders coming to you who are saying, how can I essentially be a better leader to the people that I lead? And
Yep.
the protocol is we need to do some self introspection, and that's essentially what's going to enable you to be a greater leader.
Big time.
So serve yourself first, and that's going to allow you to serve others. Is that essentially what we're saying?
That's right. Yeah.
And why
I would say that all team, organizational, coaching, leadership, I would say, yeah, all leadership on teams begins with the individual knowing how to lead themselves more lovingly, more consciously. So I think that's where I begin with people. And then they say, oh, but I need my boss to change, or I need my team to change. And I said, well, this is an inside job. And so we're going to spend as many months or years as we can to shift and really examine why you're triggered by your team, why you're triggered by them being 1 minute late to a meeting. Like, what does that mean for you? What's your relationship to control? And so we really do get pretty specific and pretty detailed with, I guess, people's neuroses and habits and patterns. But yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. I guess I resonate again. I feel like I'm saying that a lot on this podcast. I resonate, but I am really resonating with all of the things you're talking about and reflecting my own journey. But as a young leader, it was all about trying to, I guess, change others. And I would put a lot of the tension that I would feel in the workplace, or the lack of productivity that I would sense in my team, to being like, you just need to be more, you need to be better, you need to do X differently. And it wasn't until until I started my own.
Well, it was bringing up something for you, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, well, 100%. But I didn't have that awareness at the time to know that it was bringing up something in me. But it wasn't until I started my own introspection and my own journey, which I just honestly quietly went along alone. I didn't really know that I never thought that there was experts out there who could help me. So it was just burying myself in books and reading every self-help book on the planet to try and figure out how I could be better and how I could be different. And, as I was going on that journey, I always talk about this. It's like almost like every self-help book I picked up, every page, I would just be like, yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. Oh, and here's the solution, how to change it. Amazing. So I got I kind of created this mild addiction for years, where I just couldn't wait to pick up the next book. But that's where all the changes started to happen within my team and my organization. It was the deeper I went on my own journey, the more introspection I did, the better my relationships were with my team members.
Big time.
The better I was able to communicate, and just like, I guess those two things at the crux of every organization is what can help create amazing organizations, build better relationships, and learn to communicate better.
That's it. And I would say that those are definitely top. And I would say, like, that reduces the tension. We started this podcast talking about withholding. Like if you withhold your feelings, ideas, and thoughts to your team or to your partner, business partner, there isn't creative energy. There isn't aliveness. There's a sense of, one of the things I love the most, a lot of times clients come to me, and I'm sure you see this too in the fitness world. I'm curious just what you think about this. But my take is, when people come to me with tension, they feel stuck in their life. They feel like they're looping and circling, right? I think breathing techniques are amazing. Go work out, amazing. Good, absolutely. Regulate the body. But something needs to be said. Part of me, what I say to people is, tell the truth. Like, what are you not admitting? What are you afraid to feel? Like, I think when we can really get down to it, all this, again, you said it before, like aches and pains and injuries and like sadness and, just rumination. And we're not saying what needs to be said. And I think, again, that's our responsibility to regulate this mind and body, is to actually say what needs to be said, and obviously find the time and place to do that. But I think it's the best state management technique on the planet, is learning how to reveal what matters most.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, knowing how much traumas and feelings can build up and eat away at you, physiologically as well as mentally. I think that's a bit that people struggle to connect the dots on. It's like, how does my knee pain have anything to do with the stress that I'm experiencing at work? And I think I see it all the time. I've had all the MRIs, I've seen all the doctors, I've been to all the physios. I have nothing physiologically wrong with me, yet I'm in chronic pain. And I think, straight away, the question in my head is like, okay, so what else is happening in your life? That's not maybe not a physical thing. Maybe, like you said, it's this
big time.
What are you withholding that's manifesting? And this is a hard conversation to have. Because people come to me as a strength and conditioning coach, and it's like, give me the physical prescription to fix A or to fix B. And I think when this conversation starts to come around, which is, okay, you've tried everything physically, seen all the doctors, you've seen all the physios, you've done every rehab protocol, but the pain is still there. Perhaps could it be a trapped emotion? Could it be a something? And then suddenly it's like, whoa, Ed, this is a little bit woo-woo. This is not what I've come to you for, like, okay, I'm going to go back over to the next doctor. And I'll even, just on behalf of myself, to admit that it's a hard thing to talk about. Like, there isn't the data out there. There isn't the science papers. There isn't the research that's saying, like, this is what could potentially be happening. And this is why you need to start addressing.
Well, I would say there is the research. A lot of trauma therapists talk and write about this quite a bit. I mean, The Body Keeps a Score is a very incredible book. It's amazing. Like, there is science about that. I mean, I think when we understand the nervous system and the body, I think that the general public doesn't understand that. But to your point, you're right. But I think, there's so much data. I mean,
I guess what's hard is not so much that there isn't the data and the research, but it's more that if my knee is hurting, I need to see that the MRI says the meniscus is torn.
Yeah. We like to see things.
Yeah, data. I need to see that the cartilage is degenerating. And I think that's where so many of our minds are wired totally. And I totally understand why. That's just the day and age that we live in. And that's what, the medical field puts out there. That's what doctors are for, for fixing pain. And putting a band-aid on issues, which I'm very grateful for. I think they do amazing jobs most of the time. But that is certainly the mindset that people live in. And I know, I mean, the reason I feel so passionate about this is because I have read the research, and I know, and I've experienced the impact that it's had on me, because I was that person. I was the person that had every single MRI, saw every single doctor, yet I would keep on breaking and not know why. And now when I look back on the times where I would break and have all these major operations on my body as an athlete, I was always dealing with something big.
Energetic.
Energetic.
Big time.
Emotional, spiritual. Like, there was something I can connect a dot in almost every single instance as to why something might have happened.
So I'm curious for you, I'm thinking about this topic of unlearning, right? We're kind of talking around it right now, but you coach athletes, you run a gym in Hong Kong, you have clients, you obviously have a podcast, you are pretty nonstop in terms of helping others. What are you unlearning right now since so much of your life is giving, supporting others, like showing up for their mind and body, your coaches, the people who work for you, like what are you unlearning in your process these days?
Or, I mean, so much, so much all the time. Help direct me. Give me another nudge in another direction.
Well, it's kind of like I guess unlearning, right? It's like not like should. I don't like I think should is a preference in this example. Like I know I should be doing less of this, but I'm not willing yet. I'm still committed to doing 6 high intensity workouts a week when I know my body should be doing 3. So I would say that person is unlearning, right? Like what their body can handle and why they're committed to the endorphin high, maybe, I don't know. But so I guess it's like, what are you kind of wrestling with these days?
Yeah. Okay. I love the way that you put that. What are you wrestling with? I think the exercise part, I think that's worth talking about because I do speak about this a lot. Because I wore an athlete hat for many, many years of my life. That was my identity. I was a professional rugby player. I transitioned into the sport of CrossFit with the goal of trying to make it to the CrossFit Games. And whilst I was coaching on the side, I identified more as the athlete. That brought me the plaudits, that brought me the recognition, that brought me the speaking engagements, and pursuing that and obnoxiously not listening to my body ended up in me having a lot of issues. Not only in my rugby days, but even in my CrossFit days, like chronically burnt out, chronically injured, chronically in pain. So there was a big unlearning process there that had to happen. It's like, this isn't good. This certainly doesn't feel healthy. I know that elite level sports are not necessarily healthy, but this really doesn't feel healthy. And the other elite athletes that I'm surrounded by, like, they're not suffering in the way that I'm suffering. So a lot had to change there. And so just on the training part, I then embarked on a journey of going from basically overcooking every workout and smashing myself into the ground to then basically chronically undercooking every workout. So where I'm at right now is having, especially during the pandemic, where, the priority most definitely wasn't my own training. I still trained 5 days a week. That's a commitment and a habit that I've very much ingrained, and I love doing it. It's a highlight of my day. Every time I journal at night, one of the highlights of my day was the training session and the movement that I did, and I love it. But, having competed again last year to, in the CrossFit Open, which is this global competition that happens every year, I kind of like felt this like fire in me light again, where I was like, you know what, this used to be me. Like, I used to be a hard charging athlete that used to just go hard all the time, science competitions, put myself out there. And then I broke myself so badly that I basically went to the other end of the spectrum. I continued to train, but I took it really, really easy. And maybe at the cost of that, my development and my progress in the training space, which is still really important to me. Like, I want to be the fittest, strongest version of myself until the day that I die. But maybe I haven't actually been pushing myself hard enough. So like going back to that sympathetic, parasympathetic, I was like all in on this end of the spectrum. Then I kind of went to this end of the spectrum. And now I'm kind of like in that middle ground again, where I'm like, you know what? I do think doing harder physical tasks is important, mentally and physically. And so where I'm at right now with that is like, I'm trying to do harder things in the training space again. But whilst always being conscious that, like, at the end of the day, health and longevity is the goal. So I'm not willing to sacrifice short-term health. I'm not willing to be in pain anymore. I don't want to be picking up injuries, but I think I've got a bigger buffer to play with than I give myself. So that's one big unlearning process that's constantly changing forever. And I think it always will do. The other one is, because you use it as an example, but it has been, on the forefront of my mind, is this concept of how much do I want to work? And you're right. Like, I do a lot of things. But I also, this is a wrestle. This is the wrestling match that's always taking part in my mind. Is part of me loves the idea of working 4 days a week, having a slow morning, finishing at 4 p.m. every day, and having a lifestyle that allows me to get out in nature and explore and travel a little bit more. Part of me also knows that everything that I do in my job right now, I genuinely love. There actually isn't anything that I have to do apart with, which is part of my work, that I don't enjoy doing, which I then also see as a massive privilege. It's like, I get to act like everything I do with my job, I really genuinely enjoy. So the wrestling match is, where's the sweet spot? Like, I work 6 days a week, really, like, and then even on the Sunday, I'll probably still find myself doing a little bit of something. But knowing that I also don't know if that's really what I want. A big part of this that I struggle with is expectation from others. So perhaps there's still people pleasing in there, deeply embedded, which is I'm the boss. I'm the guy who's worked all these years to build this amazing company. Like, I need to be seen to be working hard. And that's something that I used to think about all the time. And I've really taken the pressure off myself a lot these days, but it's still hard. I still see it. I still see it prevalent within my culture, within my team. Sometimes like to make a joke and say, oh, I'm just here slaving away, I'm grinding, or I'm just here, I was in at 7 a.m. and I left at 7 p.m. and I'm like, hey guys,
it's such a weird,
we've got to cut that,
Yeah.
It's not, it's not about the quantity. Like, at the end of the day, I say to my team all the time, it's like, I just want you to love what you do, and I want you to do things you're really good at doing. Now, if that means you work 12 hours a day because that's your choice, then amazing, own it. Like, I love that. But if that means that you want to work 5 hours a day and have afternoons off, like, I also love that. And 12-hour guy isn't better than the 5-hour guy. You just you just value different things, and that's totally okay.
I love your unlearnings. I resonate with both of them very much. And I think that everyone here listening really will resonate with the latter, especially just because I'm sure people in my world just thinking about how much do I work and who is it for, and how, what am I trying to prove? And, 4 days, 5 days, if you think about the 5-day work week, right? 9 to 5, it was started from the agriculture system, farming. It was when the sun came up and went down. That's how we decided humans should be working 40, 50 hours a week. That's actually not relevant for most people. And with AI and all these things, it may not be necessary. And I think, and I actually just too empathize, because I struggle too with that. I'm like, there are days I don't have to do 5 hours of work. I actually said that to someone recently. I said, I've had my best year in business in a long time this past year. And I said, sometimes I work 4 or 5 hours a day max. And this person, their eyes like popped out of their head. They're like, what? And I was like, yeah, like, I get to be a human all day long, first of all. But like, why did we have it ingrained in our minds that 9 or 10 hours was relevant? I just think it's the most crazy, chaotic thing. That I think it's capitalism. I think it's consumerism. I think it's, we got to consume. More is better, bigger is better, faster is better. And I think that that's something that we can't intellectually know. Like, I think people in this podcast listening are like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. You can get done what you need to get done in 4 days. Take 3 days off to travel, volunteer, build something. But it's deeper than that. And so, I mean, to anyone listening, I work with it too. I'm unlearning it too. And I'm way better at it now than I was 2 years ago. But man, it's a thing.
Yeah. And something I think about a lot is like, one of my big triggers, and this happened yesterday, actually, at this, I keep on referencing this public speaking event that I did at my old school. But one of my old teachers, who I have a good relationship with, she said, "Oh, Ed, you look so tanned at the moment." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I've actually, I've just been I had an amazing trip. We ran an athlete camp in Cebu, Philippines. The weather was beautiful. Then I was coaching at the semifinals, and Korea was awesome." And her comment was, "It must be nice living the life of leisure." And that's something that I think we deal with all the time. And immediately this trigger went off in me. Was, okay, Ed, you need to now justify that you work really, really hard, and that you need to dispel.
And did you justify? Did you go into defensive mode and justify?
I didn't, but I felt the trigger. I felt, and I think that this is the thing. It's like, I love the saying, trust the triggers to teach. That is one of the biggest triggers that I think I still suffer with in my job, which was another one. And I sometimes I bite on this, and then when I bite on it, I'm pissed off at myself. I'm like, Ed, come on, you can't bite on this. But I'm going to share this story because I think a lot of people will resonate, especially with in the day and age we live in, where working from home has become much more of a thing. And truth be told, it's a Friday right now. It's 9 a.m. in the morning, and I'm going to arrive in my gym at probably about 10 a.m. And that's pretty much how I start most days. I start on my computer desk at about 7 a.m. I do all the really hard, meaningful work that I need silence for because I can't do it in a busy office. And I do that in my office at home. And I love it. I love that routine every morning. But sometimes you roll in the gym at 10 a.m. and what does someone say? Oh, it must be nice starting your day at 10 a.m. Oh, like you're late
So
to
it's so
work,
interesting. Like the
isn't it?
culture of like, why don't we have a culture of appreciation? Like, hey Ed, good job. What's your morning routine like? So stoked for you. It like I don't know where like if it feels like first of all, I think people are just mimetic entirely. We just copy each other. So they heard that from someone and then they're just going to repeat that from someone else.
Yeah.
And I think that yeah, arrive at work at 10 a.m. and you don't have to ever justify. You don't even
Yeah.
have to ever let anybody know that from 7 a.m. you're doing the hard work. Like no one has to know that. I think that we have sort of a weird society in that way. So um yeah, it's funky, right?
I think we struggle with that so much. So I find it so hard still. And I think when I think back though, I was probably the guy who would have said to the person who rolled in at 10 a.m., oh,
Yeah.
must be nice for you to arrive at 10 a.m. And
Well,
I do think
I think those people, Ed, don't know how to relax. I think they have no idea what it means to have a morning routine, perhaps, or that hard work and leisure aren't mutually exclusive.
mm,
Like when you're in flow state, it isn't grind. It's just it's effortless. And so I think people like those two people that said that to you, like they want to go on vacation and they don't know how to give themselves permission. Like
yes.
that guy wants to sleep in and he doesn't know how because he's still hardwired to prove and prove and prove and prove. And so I think every time I hear those comments, I'm just like, okay,
Yeah.
I am where I am and you are where you are, you know,
Exactly. And I think there is a lot of projecting, right? It's you're projecting
big time,
your own insecurities and the things you say.
100%.
And when I think back to me, for someone who valued hard work so much and I wanted to tell the world how hard I was working all the time, that's when I would say to someone rocking in at 10 a.m., oh, it'd be nice to have a slow morning.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
recognize that now that that's not who I want to be. I don't want to be someone whose self-worth is dictated by how much work they do, because that's what I used to think. The
Yeah.
more I work, the more loved I'm going to be, the more respect I'm going to be. I totally don't associate that with that at all anymore. And I'm trying to break
Yeah.
that. But it doesn't mean that the triggers aren't still there.
Yeah.
So
I mean, they are
that,
big time.
yeah, when that teacher says that, or when that client says that, like it does trigger the old me. And then I
Totally.
have that split second opportunity to make a decision where it's like, okay,
Mm.
do you bite and do you now justify what you've been doing, and tell them that in fact you have been really working hard and they've totally misjudged it, which would be validating my own insecurities again, or you know what, I have nothing to prove to you, like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know what I do and I'm totally content and happy with it, and you're totally entitled to your opinion and that's
Yeah.
absolutely fine. But it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I don't still think those things. So I'd probably say that's
Big
one of my
time. Well,
biggest unlearnings right now.
yeah. Yeah. Not biting the hook. One of my favorite meditation teachers, Tara Brock, she says that uh defensiveness is the first act of war. So like the moment we get defensive and justify and rationalize, we're already at war. We're already trying to prove. We're already afraid of being. We're already in the space of right, wrong. And I think that I work with that myself every day, right? In relationships and life, and go to justify, go to explain, defend, and I do that a lot less, which is cool. But I can see how much of my life has been that, and I start to see it in other people more. Maybe
Mm.
siblings or friends. I realize how much they justify and defend themselves, and I'm like, you don't have to do that. Like, but it's a learning process. We can't come out of the womb knowing that. Actually, out of the womb, we probably didn't defend anything. We never rationalized. We never justified. We never did anything like that. Until we developed the ego, and then we started to dance with all of that. So
Yeah, I think just a massive takeaway thing for me is always just reminding myself that it's like you gotta love yourself, and when you love yourself, it doesn't matter doesn't matter what others think sometimes. And really like not letting those opinions and those moments affect me and impact me or change my self-worth.
Yeah.
But I honestly think it will be a constant work on. This will be something I will be trying to unlearn probably for the rest of my life. And I think the whole concept of unlearning, when I was exposed to the idea of like releasing past traumas or sitting with traumas or doing the introspective work to figure out why you feel certain ways, is that I was very much in a mindset that at some point I was going to arrive at a destination where these things were no longer a part of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm very much now comfortable with knowing that some of these things are going to be a part of me probably forever.
Yeah. And it makes, Ed, your story more interesting. You have a richer tapestry. You're shedding layers and layers and layers of your being that never served you then, and probably definitely isn't serving you now. And I think that makes your story more interesting, right? Like I don't know that there's an arrival point, even though of course I think about it myself all the time, right? Like, well, I've made it when, but yeah, I think those narratives are ones we're just going to keep dancing with for like a long, long time. And I think that's kind of the spiritual play of the work, is seeing when you go down that path. And I kind of ask myself and my clients a lot, I'm like, again, am I committed to being right, or can I hold this lightly? Is my fist closed or is it open? And I think those are really simple ways to just realize, oh, we're going down that path again. We're there again. So Ed, I want to do something with you. I do with every guest. I have some rapid fire questions for you.
Yes. And I'm going to finish with my rapid fire question to you.
Perfect. I have a lot here, so stay with me here. First thing that comes to mind, whatever comes up for you, just share it. Hardcover book or Audible?
Audible.
Last song you listened to?
Cool Down by, I'm going to say his name wrong, Koke Kai. I think it's something like that.
Cool. Person you look up to the most?
This is no longer quick fire.
I know, right?
This is hard. I'm gonna come ask me that at the end. Next one.
Okay. Best leadership advice you ever heard or received?
I don't know if this is the best one, but I like it. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
I love that. What breaks your heart?
It's a heavy. These are great questions, Elisa. What breaks my heart? There's a better word to describe this, but a lack of kindness between human beings. Yeah,
same. Last two questions. Who is the last person that gave you a really good hug?
My girlfriend, my partner this morning.
Beautiful. And this is a debate question. It's very controversial on my podcast. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh, you know what? I would not call a hot dog a sandwich. I'm sorry.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I'm on your team too.
Okay, well, my question to you, Elisa, is if you could have your perfect day, what would you do and what would it look like?
I guess I have to think about what perfect is, right?
Your ideal day.
I think that it's something about waking up in a house and feeling really supported and loved by the people that are there. And just waking up and not looking at my phone and sitting down and reading something and writing something before I begin to take in data, and having I love my iced matcha in the morning, matcha tea. And then moving and like being in nature, honestly, just like whether that be a walk, a run, a hike, just being outside for before noon. If I can move before noon, I'm in a good space for the rest of the day. And ideally it's outside. And then some level of play, like It could be like spiritual play, like having a riff or a conversation with someone, just really feeling connected with someone. I sometimes play with this too, Ed. I'll be in New York and I'll have like a 2-minute moment with the barista, and it feels like the best moment. I'm like, ah, cool. I had that exchange with a stranger, right? Like those are the moments where I feel alive. Like was walking down the street the other day and I saw this guy with a t-shirt on and had like a planet on it. I just stopped a guy and I was like, I love your t-shirt, and that sort of alive energy is what makes me feel like the day is well lived. If I can just get out of myself and be into the world in those small, small ways, nothing grandiose. Right. And then I like doing meaningful work. I probably would coach a client or two. And be really present with them and see where we go. And then I don't know, probably something chill at night. I'm less of a bar party person as anyone who knows me. I'm more just like, let's watch a movie or play a board game or something. And be in bed by 10. That'd be a wonderful day.
Love it. Thank you for sharing.
Of course. Well, what's your perfect day? You have to reciprocate the question. What happens?
Day? Not too dissimilar from yours, to be honest. And I think that's something that I notice is a very recurring theme with a lot of my guests, is that we have very similar perfect days. I would be awake. I would love to wake up as the sun rises. And I would love to be in a place where the sun's not rising too aggressively early. I'd say around like a 5:45, 6 a.m. sunrise. So I wake up, I watch the sunrise. My morning routines are exactly as they are now. So, there's no digital intake for the first hour of waking. It's a home cooked breakfast with a coffee, and I'm sitting eating it outdoors where the sunlight of the morning is
always.
Whether it's on a balcony or a rooftop or in a garden with grass under my feet or on a beach, that would be amazing. I actually think my morning then would be doing some meaningful work as well. There would be an hour or two, maybe an hour or three of doing some form of work and what I'm doing right now, which is, serving others. And then it would be movement. It would be training of some sort, probably in the gym. It would be a nice, wholesome, healthy lunch with friends and people that I love. The afternoon would be in nature, whether it be a mountain, it would be the sea. It'd probably be doing some form of movement in nature once again, whether it's hiking, it's playing sport, but definitely outdoors for sure. And dinner with my loved ones again, and meaningful conversation, no electronics at nighttime, just being super present with whoever's around me. And then basically the nighttime protocol that I have now, and in bed probably by 8:30 p.m.
That's right. 8:30. My goodness. Go ahead.
And honestly, when I talk about my perfect day, it's really not too dissimilar to what my day looks like now. The only things I'm missing, and I'm very aware of this, and me and my partner talk about it all the time, is we don't have outdoor space at home. So if we had a balcony or a rooftop that had sunlight on it, I'd almost be living my perfect day every single day. If we had a beach,
you have something to work towards now.
Yeah, we had a beach on our doorstep, that would be, just the next level.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, Ed, it's been great to be a guest on your podcast and to have you on mine and to do our first pod swap officially. And I just can't wait to see what more you're up to with training and, growth mindset. And just, I want to see what your next expansion of your comfort zone is too.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And I want to reciprocate all those lovely words. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to speak to you. I've actually really, really, really loved this conversation. And when I look at my rough agenda of what we were going to talk about today, I think we literally covered like 2 out of the 8 subjects.
Perfect.
So that might mean that we're going to have a follow-up episode at some point.
For sure. I mean, self-validation is its own, and responsibility is really its own podcast. So
yes.
Happy to.
But love the work that you're doing as well. Love the content that you're putting out there into the world. And of course your podcast. So thank you very much for your time, your energy. I know it's getting late over there in New York. And I look forward to our next one.
100%. Take care.